So you're a libertarian, and you don't believe the propaganda about government awesomeness you were subjected to in 4th grade. You want real history and economics. Well, learn in your car from professors you can trust with Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. And if you join through the Liberty Classroom link at scotthorton.org, we'll make a donation to support The Scott Horton Show. Liberty Classroom, the history and economics they didn't teach you.
Hey. Welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. Next up is our friend Eric Margolis. Oh, yeah, I should have called you on Skype. I forgot about that. I didn't get my head organized about these things. Welcome back to the show, Eric. How are you doing?
Thank you, Scott. I'm watching events unfold in confusing Yemen with considerable interest.
Yeah, me too, only I don't have the context to understand it, which is why I got you on the phone. But before I ask you to explain the context, I want to explain you. Eric Margolis, why he's a journalist, has been for many decades and covered a lot of wars, and he wrote the books War at the Top of the World and American Raj, Liberation or Domination, and you can find his website at ericmargolis.com. Spell it like Margolis, ericmargolis.com. And you can find what he writes also at lourockwell.com and at unz.com, unz.com. And, of course, we run them in the Viewpoint section all the time at antiwar.com, including, I think, today. So, anyway, now that we got all that out of the way, tell me, what's a Yemen? What's going on in Yemen?
Well, the answer is nobody really knows. It's what diplomats call a fluid situation, very confusing. Encapsulated a U.S.-installed regime in Sanaa, the capital of this very, very remote country, southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. About 25 million people. Nobody knows. They can't count them because they're moving around. A very wild country. Northerners from who are known as Houthis. Here's another new name for us to deal with, who are kind of Shiites, Shiite lights. Have been fighting the central government in Sanaa, which is backed by the U.S., and they have now advanced on the capital, are in the capital, have seized some of the buildings, are trying to oust the government, it seems, unless they can come to a last-minute deal. And the U.S. is involved in this because the CIA and U.S. Air Force have been regularly bombing and attacking in Yemen.
Mm-hmm. And, well, and of course they're attacking supposedly Al-Qaeda targets, but who else? Do they attack the Houthis? Because I know that there's a lot of propaganda about how, well, of course, anywhere there's a Shia, then that means that the Ayatollah Khomeini is behind it over there in Iran.
Yes, the U.S. Air Force had bombed Houthis over recent years. They killed one of the senior Houthi leaders. It was described as a Saudi intervention, but it was obviously U.S. Air Force probably flying out of the increasingly important U.S. Secret military base in Djibouti on the other side of the Red Sea in what used to be French territory. So the UN and the CIA is all involved on the ground, and I think almost weekly we're getting reports of drone strikes against various Houthis or other rebels, because Yemen is full of rebellious tribes, and down south in what used to be Aden, the British colony of Aden, there is another independence movement there that is also fighting the government in Sanaa.
Mm-hmm. And now this guy, Hadi, he's Hillary Clinton's handpicked successor to Saleh, who was the American sock puppet dictator before, correct?
That's correct.
And so then the prime minister, Basandawa, who has resigned, he's resigning now because of what exactly? Because Hadi refuses to compromise with the Houthis, or because he's been made to?
I think probably because he's worried about his life.
He just needs to get out of town is all.
Exactly. Yemeni politics often involve lead poisoning, and these are very wild and crazy people. Yemen, when I first went to Yemen, I think it was in 1976, it was just creeping into the 8th century A.D., and the capital, Sanaa, was surrounded by walls with gates, and at dusk, somebody would go up and blow this ram's horn, and they would close the gates for the night. Everybody's walking around with guns and daggers. I loved it. It was straight out of the Old Testament.
Well, so, I mean, in other words, it's not really a state anyway, but I guess maybe it is. That was a long time ago. When was the last time you were there?
Oh, this must be about 1990-something. It's quite a while.
Yeah.
It's not a place you want to rush back to. And the only reason...
I did see a anti-war propaganda video against the drone strikes in Yemen that showed pretty modern city and kids in Western dress on their little playground and whatever. A sophisticated and I think successful attempt to Westernize in place of humanize them, because human ain't good enough, of course. Western really helps.
Well, that's right. And what that video was showing was there was some oil that was hit in Yemen, and the Americans poured in, and a lot of money came in, much of which was stolen or skimmed off. But some of it ended up putting up modern buildings in a more modern section in the capital. But old Yemen still remains, and what's important is that it is a tribal society like Afghanistan, and while there's sort of a modicum of westernized culture in the capital, the rest of the country is still run by tribal chiefs and feuds and fights. And the other notable thing about Yemen is that everybody's stoned in the country. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody stops work, and the guys all get together and they chew this narcotic shrub called khat, Q-A-T, and it gives you a mild high. It's like a cross between pot and coke, and it's very convivial. Everybody sits and chats and laughs and has a good time, but they get stoned and nobody eats. That's why lots of Yemenis are very skinny.
Well, it seems like they'd all be getting along if maybe they needed to switch to weed. But anyway, well, so now the deal is the Houthi rebellion is always well, and up in the north there's the Houthi rebellion, but now they're in the capital city. Was this a big unexpected event that they were able to come and take this much territory and force whatever change I guess they're attempting to force now?
It was, and it's a blow for the imperial forces in Washington, who are using Yemen to suppress rebels there, but also to monitor the mouth of the Red Sea. And there was talk that the Houthis were somehow playing footsie with the Iranians, both being Shiites, and that the Iranians were gaining influence in Yemen. And, of course, this set off alarm bells in Washington, and they had to rush more drones and more CIA agents to Yemen. But in the end, Yemen is a largely ungovernable country. It's very wild, very primitive, as I said, very mountainous, and the only part of the Arabian Peninsula that has any rain. So, and it has a large population that's probably almost as large as Saudi Arabia, which causes great worry to Washington.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Well, Scott, that's the undercover worry about Yemen. Nobody really gives a hoot about Yemen, but there are about between 2 and 3 million Yemeni immigrants in Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of them was the father of Osama bin Laden. And, I mean, he's dead now, but in the past they came, and they're still coming across the border. And there's concern that these radicalized Yemenis may form the basis for some kind of attempt to overthrow or change the Saudi dynasty. Great worry.
Oh, man. I was just about to ask you a thing, and now the music's playing, which means we got to go out and take this break. But hang tight, Eric. We'll be back in a few minutes with you. Hang tight, everybody. We'll be back in a few minutes with Eric Margolis at ericmargolis.com. We're talking about the situation in Yemen, and then I'm going to ask him some Islamic State stuff, too. And it's going to be very interesting right after this. You hate government? One of them libertarian types? Or maybe you just can't stand the president, gun grabbers, or warmongers. Me too. That's why I invented LibertyStickers.com. Well, Rick owns it now, and I didn't make up all of them, but still, if you're driving around and want to tell everyone else how wrong their politics are, there's only one place to go. LibertyStickers.com has got your bumper covered. Left, right, libertarian, empire, police, state, founders, quotes, central banking. Yes, bumper stickers about central banking. Lots of them. And, well, everything that matters. LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. On the line with Eric Margolis from ericmargolis.com. Talking about Yemen, where the Houthis are on the march. Well, they've signed a deal, it says here, with Yemen parties to form a new government. And they took it. They occupied a bunch of buildings and said, let us into the government. We're not really asking. And then, so apparently they signed a deal. Hey, that could have been worse. I don't know exactly how many people have been killed leading up to this, but that's better than things could be sometimes. I wonder whether you would make the parallel, Eric, between Pakistan policy, where they let us bomb inside their country as long as we'll kill their government's enemies, along with the ones that our government's looking for, in, as you mentioned, drone strikes against these Houthi rebels. Or I guess it's maybe not quite the same thing, since, as you say, they equate the Houthis with the Iranians. So that's at least makes it pretty easy for the Yemenis to convince them to help. But then, so I wonder if you'd make that parallel for what it's worth. And then I wonder whether you think that maybe that's helped lead to the so-called, at least, crisis such as it is right now, where they're now more powerful, strong enough to demand real participation in the government in the capital as never before.
That is a good comparison, a good analogy. The U.S. influence in Pakistan is largely expressed through cash. We have bought off many of the political and military leaders in Pakistan with consulting payments. And in exchange for that, they're letting the U.S. run around and bomb their citizens in the tribal territories. Same thing in Yemen. U.S. is the main supplier of cash for that dirt-poor country. All the generals and politicians and so on are on our payroll one way or another, and they do what they're told. But there may be change because there's great unhappiness in Yemen over these drone strikes and other bombing, American Special Forces operations. We've kicked another hornet's nest, and the hornets are getting out their stingers.
Yeah, it seems like... Geez, I'm trying to remember, Eric, I'm sorry, my footnote, the last long-form piece of journalism I read about, I know who it was. It was Gregory Johnson, had written this really long thing for maybe The Atlantic or something about, if we blow up your wedding, we'll pay you $80,000, something like that was in the title of it. Real long-form piece there, and he talked about just how with every single drone strike, or, Tomahawk missile or whatever it is, or JSOC raid, or exactly how it goes down. Every killing by the Americans there, they just rally more and more people to Al-Qaeda's cause. And even where you have meetings, and maybe this is deliberate, I don't know, I don't mean to be that bad of a kook about it, but meetings where the local tribal leaders have summoned the Al-Qaeda people to basically, bend them to their will and say, listen, here's the line around here. I'm the big boss around here, not you, and here's how it's going to be. And then America comes by and drones the three of them, right, including the tribal chief who was putting Al-Qaeda in check, and this kind of thing. And they've just created a huge problem where before it was just the switchboard house. The father-in-law of the 9/11 hijacker guy that lived there and his 10 friends. Now it's a real movement, apparently.
Well, it's true. We've seen exactly the same thing in Afghanistan. Even President Karzai there, the outgoing president, has said that these drone attacks are doing nothing but mainly killing civilians. And for every one killed, 10 people are joining Taliban in Afghanistan. Same thing in Yemen. There's great fury over this. We don't understand how much these societies are ruled by the desire and the need for revenge. So clearly, we're by the so-called war on terror is really almost a war against the United States ourselves, because we are generating more anti-American forces than even we can deal with.
Mm-hmm. Well, which brings me to exactly what I wanted to ask you about, really, which is the threat to the American people here. It was kind of a funny spectacle where I'm the paranoid, and I have a former CIA officer, Phil Giraldi, on the line a couple of segments back, and I'm saying, oh no, I think these terrorists are going to get us, and Giraldi's saying, nah, don't worry about it, it's all a big hyped up threat. And obviously there is a big hyped up threat, because they're trying to scare us into letting them go back to full-scale war here and all that, no question about that. And you know, as we're sitting here talking about radicalizing Al-Qaeda members in Yemen, we got to acknowledge Yemen is a long way from here, and, you know, sending some printer cartridges full of non-functioning explosives in the belly of a plane is not an existential threat, it doesn't seem like. You know what I mean? They haven't been able to launch or manage any kind of real attack against us. I guess the underpants bomber was close, but so there is that. But then on the other hand, we're talking about raw numbers, and they only got to get lucky once and all those kind of cliches. So I wonder, what do you think is the real threat to the United States, not just to our so-called interests over there, but to the American people from all the enemies our government's been creating over all this time?
I absolutely think that the biggest threat to the United States is from its own hawkish, warlike factions in Washington, who are cutting back on civil liberties and who have created this monstrous espionage apparatus and moving us rapidly to 1984, back to 1984, all under the guise of national security. I shudder every time I hear this expression. Look, there's no great threat to the United States in the Middle East. That is absolutely absurd. The claims that are being made are childish and hysterical, like ISIS sneaking over the border from Mexico disguised as cantaloupes, something like that. You know, we become hysterical. We're a nation of over 300 million people. We can absorb any attacks that come. We can't allow ourselves to live in terror and fear and hype. But turn on the TV these days, and all you get is intense fear-mongering. And unfortunately, the average American is not sufficiently educated or wise to the ways of the world to understand that this is all just propaganda.
Yeah. Now, see, I'm kind of in a unfortunate position propaganda-wise, because my real thing is, yeah, I'm paranoid, but I think the best solution is to stop intervening, which makes it sound like, oh, I think America should back down to the danger or whatever. But the point is, hell, even on Fox News, they talk about, gee, even the Republican senators say, are we just poking a hornet's nest with no plan to actually take care of the hornets? And, of course, the Republicans by that mean sending the ground troops, that'll get rid of them, but we already know better than that. But, you know, that seems to be the frame of it, and I just wonder how many hornet's nests you can bash open with a bat without expecting for things to happen. And I'm more concerned then, of course, about, you know, how Americans react to any attacks, you know, giving even more blank checks to our government to do even greater damage over there. It just seems like, you know, they've succeeded in creating the terrorist threat that they always pretended existed out there. You know, I don't know.
Well, exactly. I don't know. Our government, I've never seen such a blunder in government. It makes even the Bush administration look somewhat competent. The policies going all different ways. It's being made by amateurs in the White House and National Security Council who don't know anything about world affairs or military affairs for that matter. And yes, we're sticking our nose everywhere. And of course we're going to get stung. In fact, I wrote in my book, American Raj, I had a quote from one of my columns that was a week before 9/11 saying it's only a matter of any day now the United States is going to be struck. And it's obvious we're creating enemies everywhere we go. And not only are we lowering our profile here, we almost got in a war with Russia over Ukraine and nuclear-armed powers. Our troops are now spreading out all over Africa. There's a recipe for more problems. And now Obama, Nobel Peace Prize winner, is talking about expanding the war into Iraq, which could go into Iran, and Afghanistan is a mess, and Pakistan is a mess, and of course, don't forget the pivot to Asia. Whatever happened to that? I don't know.
Well, and whatever happened to the border dispute between ISIS and Jordan that broke out back a few weeks ago, Eric? What happens when ISIS sacks the king's castle there, and the Israelis cross the river? Then you got ISIS and Iran on the same side at that point, right?
That's right. The situation is hopelessly confused. The people in Washington making policy are too ignorant of Middle East affairs to manage them. We're pulling strings. We don't know what's happening there. And the Israelis, as you say, are considering entering the fray, which also means attacking Lebanon. What's going to happen with the Turks, we don't know. But we have created one unholy mess there, and nobody knows how to get us out of it.
Yeah. Do you think there's any actual danger to the Jordanian army from ISIS? They seem pretty successful with their suicide bombing tactics and whatever. They take city after city. Nuisance
value. ISIS's capability has been wildly exaggerated. A bunch of guys in pickup trucks are not.
But what about the Jordanian army and their actual capabilities?
It's very good.
Oh yeah.
It's a very crack army. What used to be known, when it was known as the Arab Legion years ago, was the best army in the Arab world. British trained, used to be British officered, and it can take care of itself very well. But Jordan is an American protectorate. If they can't, the Americans and the British will send in troops, as they always do. It's part of our American Raj for ruling the Mideast.
Right. I wonder if it's within the Likud party's plan, though, for the Israeli Raj. Go ahead and we're coming for you, Euphrates River, someday kind of thing. But for now, at least, just create, the occupied territory of the East Bank of the Jordan River and work on that for a while.
Well, Israel has had a two-track policy there for years. They've been saying that really Jordan is the Palestinian state, and they should expel all their Palestinians, shove them into the Jordanian desert. Already 60% of the Jordanian population are Palestinians. And the other thing is now the new initiatives come out of the Israelis. There's talk about building a new Palestinian state around the Gaza open-air prison. And Israelis have asked the dictator in Egypt, General Field Marshal al-Sisi, to give them some desert scrubland around Sinai to create a new Palestinian state that would allow the Israelis to ethnically cleanse the rest of the Palestinians with less opprobrium from abroad.
Mm. Yeah. Well, here's their other option. They can just go ahead and push all the Palestinians out of East Jerusalem and the West Bank, maybe into the river, across the bridge, into the Transjordan, into Jordan, and then call that the two-state solution, and go ahead and take Judea and Samaria. I don't know if they really, would do that, but then again, would the Americans stop them? And isn't that really the only question of what they can get away with or not?
Well, the recent shelling of Gaza were over 2,100 Palestinians. 70% of them civilians were killed by the Israelis using American weapons. mostly American weapons, was a graphic message to us that nobody's going to stop the Israelis, that the United States' hands are tied. Congress will do whatever Israel tells it to do. The president doesn't have the strength, particularly not this one, to stop the Israelis. The American elections are coming up, and there'll always be American elections coming up. Politicians are scared to antagonize friends of Israel. So the Israelis are now feeling their oats. They've seen all their enemies collapse. They practically run Egypt now. The last country that opposed Israel, Syria, that's gone. There's only Iran way off in the distance. So Israel is emerging as the 800-pound gorilla in the Mideast, and its territorial designs may not have been fully fulfilled yet.
God dang. Well, I kind of think we shouldn't go down this line of questioning anymore. I don't want to encourage them at all. Like, man, those guys are really right. We can get away with anything.
They can.
Yeah, because, I mean, really, joking about the Euphrates River and all of that, that's anything. That's in the plan for Greater Israel someday. Hey, why not sooner than later? Jeez.
Well, now is a great time for them to do it. The Israelis control Congress, a lot of the American media, and they have a president who is scared of his own shadow at this point. And, of course, they've got Hillary Clinton coming down the pike. So everything's looking good for the Israelis.
Yeah, and pretty good pretext in ISIS in western Iraq, too. So
that's right.
There you go. All right, well, I've already kept you way over longer than I meant to here, but thanks very much for your time, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Scott.
Thanks a lot. That's Eric Margolis, everybody. He's at ericmargolis.com. And I got to start asking people permission. Can I keep you a third segment instead of just going on and on? Because people got errands to run, but then they don't want to be rude and say, hey, cut me loose here. And then, I don't. Anyway. The great Eric Margolis, everybody. American Raj, Liberation or Domination. And War at the Top of the World. That one's all about Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Kashmir and India and all that conflict over there and all that. Yep. Hey, Al Scott here. If you're like me, you need coffee. Lots of it. And you probably prefer it tastes good, too. Well, let me tell you about Darren's Coffee Company at darrenscoffee.com. Darren Marion is a natural entrepreneur who decided to leave his corporate job and strike out on his own, making great coffee. And Darren's Coffee is now delivering right to your door. Darren gets his beans direct from farmers around the world. All specialty, premium grade with no filler. Hey, the man just wants everyone to have a chance to taste this great coffee. Darren's Coffee. Order now at darrenscoffee.com. Use promo code Scott and save $2. darrenscoffee.com. Hey, Al Scott here for Whole Food Multi-Complete at WholeFoodComplete.com. Whole Food Multi-Complete is an entire supplement program in one bottle containing 100% RDA of vitamins and minerals, plus live probiotics, digestive enzymes, antioxidant herbs, energy nutrients, and more. It's made in America using real foods and live probiotics. No chemical synthetics. It's soy-free, gluten-free, and independently tested and verified. They're so sure you'll love it, they're taking 20% off your first order with coupon code Scott Horton. Satisfaction is guaranteed at WholeFoodComplete.com. Hey, Al Scott Horton here. I want to tell you about this great new book, Livin' La Vida Barocca, American Culture in an Age of Imperial Orthodoxies by Thomas Harrington. While he comes from the left, Harrington has little time for much of what is passed off under that label today. Like us libertarians, he puts peace and freedom first. The book's got great essays on American fascism, empire, the Israeli occupation, the left and Obama, liberalism and the state, and some interesting lessons from the history of Imperial Spain. Livin' La Vida Barocca by Thomas Harrington. Check it out at scotthorton.org/books or scotthorton.org/Amazon. Hey, Al Scott Horton here to tell you about this great new book by Michael Swanson, The War State. In The War State, Swanson examines how Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy both expanded and fought to limit the rise of the new national security state after World War II. If this nation is ever to live up to its creed of liberty and prosperity for everyone, we are going to have to abolish the empire. Know your enemy. Get The War State by Michael Swanson. It's available at your local bookstore or at Amazon.com in Kindle or in paperback. Just click the book in the right margin at scotthorton.org or thewarstate.com.